From the East Texas Sports Network studios, powered by Texas Dairy Queen, a tradition of excellence, the ETSN podcast, where Clint Buckley and Mike Graham offer their, well, they just talk. But who really cares? It's what they do best. It's the lowdown on everything high school football in East Texas. And now, Clint Buckley and Mike Graham.
We are 1 week from state championship weekend in Houston. Will East Texas be present at NRG Stadium next week? Well, I guess that all depends on how the four area teams still alive in this region fair this week. Welcome to the state semifinal edition of the ETSN.fm podcast. I'm Clint Buckley, and I'm joined by Mike Graham. How are you doing, sir?
Doing good. Really interested to learn what games we'll be doing in Houston. We've got 4 opportunities. None of the teams cross over, so, theoretically, we couldn't be going to Houston. We probably will, but we'll break it down and look at who's got the best chances this week.
Carthage, Gilmer, Mineola, Wascom are the teams that are left, and all of them are facing undefeated teams this week, so it will be a challenge. And I guess we'll start off with 4A Division I, Carthage against Waco La Vega. La Vega's, as we mentioned, they're undefeated. Carthage has kind of been the giant slayers this postseason. You know, they knocked off Stafford, an undefeated team in the area round, and they followed that up with, I think, the upset of the playoffs so far in the state and beating Navasota in the third round. Last week, it was 56-40 over Silsbee, so they're obviously playing very well. And they get a La Vega team that's unbeaten, and, Carthage has the pedigree. They've won 4 state titles since 2008 under head coach Scott Surratt. But they're going to be coming in limping a little bit as Keontae Ingram is out for the season after suffering an ankle injury last week. And that's going to be a big impact, I think, in this game. Yeah,
that's a tough break for them. Although I do really like Ravadney Hardy is a running back. He's kind of more of a fullback build, but he can get the job done in short yardage situations. And this offense is first and foremost a passing offense. I mean, we can get into the stats of Jared Blissett. I mean, he's really on the cusp of joining some elite Carthage company, and that's exciting. But I think they've got the tools to go. The thing that stands out to me about this game is how many close games Waco La Vega has won this year. I think there are like 5 of them that they've won by a possession or less.
Right, and they pretty much dominated China Spring last week, and a lot of people going into that game felt like China Spring was the favorite going in. And of course, some of our listeners in Bullard may remember China Spring. They played them this season. They're an awfully good program and a good team this year, and La Vega was able to take care of business 20-7 last week against them. What stands out the most to me about La Vega is their secondary, and I talked to Carthage coach Scott Surratt the other day about this. He says they've got 4 college players back there in the secondary, and it's headlined by their cornerback and Oklahoma commit Parrish Cobb. They also have an SMU commit back there at Brandon Benson at safety. And you mentioned Carthage, first and foremost, what do they like to do on offense? That's throw the ball this year. Jared Blissett is 132 yards away from breaking Blake Bogenschutz's single-season passing yardage record. He's going to have to bring it, and those receivers that have been playing so well for Carthage are going to have to bring it against a very good secondary and what Scott Surratt calls their biggest challenge this season.
That's right. I mean, it is unfortunate for them that they're running into a team whose strength is perfect for defending their own strength. But there should be room to run. Obviously, Waco La Vega would like to give that to Carthage over the passing game in the first place. And then, 2, probably, you can get innovative with your routes and work in the middle of the field against them. Probably the safest routes to go. But eventually, you will have to go after them and hope your receivers execute.
It's funny how the playoffs work, especially this deep. You talk about Carthage, you got Jared Blissett, who's having an all-state caliber season. You have Jakeldrick Jackson, who is climbing up the single-season receptions list in Carthage. He's having a tremendous season. You've got emerging stars like DeQuavius Bowens and Hunter Townsend, who are both sophomores who are making plays for them at receiver. But I think the player that's going to have the biggest impact on this game is going to be Ravadney Hardy, the running back for Carthage. You mentioned him at the top. They're going to have to feed him, and they're going to have to give him the ball a lot, and he's going to have a big impact in this game, I think, for Carthage to survive.
Yeah, I've seen it a few times, particularly last year. He was the primary running back, and against Gilmer, he had a productive game. I think that he's capable of that.
Yeah, and Scott Surratt mentioned that the reason why Hardy's numbers, aren't, just they don't blow anybody away is because he himself had been banged up for a lot of the years, and that's why his carries were limited during the regular season. but he believes that he's 100% healthy now, and I wouldn't be surprised if Hardy gets at least 20 carries in this game, considering how well La Vega defends the pass and the tremendous amount of talent they have back there in the secondary. So Carthage La Vega, it should be good. It's going to kick off 7:30 Friday from Homer B. Johnson Stadium in Garland. We'll have full coverage of that one Friday and Saturday. Now on to 4A Division II, a rematch, Gilmer and Salina. You want to talk about traditional powers. These two programs have combined for 9 state championships, and they meet again for the second straight year in the semifinals.
That's right. 2 of the best programs since the turn of the century meeting once again. And I think that Salina likes its odds, but this is a Gilmer team on a 30-game win streak, so I wouldn't put anything past the Buckeyes in this game.
Yeah, I mean, so you think about Salina. They've been thinking about Gilmer for a long time. The bludgeoning that Gilmer gave them in the semifinals last year, 67-14. Gilmer scored 33 points in the first quarter. That game was over pretty much right after the game kicked off. Salina was just completely taken out of the game. But it's a different year. That offense that Gilmer had last year, most of those players are gone. It was the second highest scoring offense in the history of the state of Texas. They had to replace most of those starters. And while they've been a good offense, they're averaging over 40 points per game. They're not averaging the 60 points per game that they were averaging a season ago. But it's the Gilmer defense that's been what's carried them all season long. I know you've seen Gilmer a handful of times this year. Talk about how good their defense is.
Yeah, no kidding. Particularly against Pleasant Grove, that's the game that really stands out. I mean, Gilmer commits 7 turnovers, and its defense holds it together long enough for the offense to recover and get a win there. It's a heck of a defense. I really like the secondary. Colin Hurt in the backfield is the active leading East Texan in terms of interceptions with 10. You've got DeMarco Boyd, who can play pretty much any position he wants, and really a big part of that front. And then you've got Cameron Granville, another really strong linebacker to supplement him.
Tristan Oliveras.
Yep. Yeah, 11 sacks this season. It's a phenomenal defense, and it'll have to, bring it to compete with Salina and its spread offense. The numbers they've put up, you've seen them, are pretty impressive. 52 points per game. They beat a district opponent last week, Crum, for the second time this season. 42-13 was the final last week, but in the regular season they hung 69 points on them. So this is an awfully skilled Salina offense. Their quarterback, Connor Pingleton, is really guided that team this year. He's up close to 3,400 yards passing. He's got 43 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, and he's completing 75% of his passes. And that suggests that he's not going to give Gilmer's defense that many opportunities for takeaways, and that's really what their defense has been thriving on, especially in the playoffs. You look at their numbers on the season, they forced 35 turnovers in 14 games. That's a lot. And, they've gotten 19 interceptions on the season. Of course, 10 of them belong to Colin Hurt, as you mentioned. They've also recovered 16 fumbles. I think the key to this game is going to be turnovers one way or the other. Gilmer's going to have to force them, and on offense, they're going to have to not give the ball away because, as we've seen, their offense has struggled at times with turnovers. You mentioned the 7-turnover game against Pleasant Grove. They had some other games where they were careless with the football, and I don't think against a team like Salina they're going to be able to get away with something like that. Yeah, the Atlanta game was another really bad one for the Gilmer offense. I think 3 interceptions, and against a running team like Atlanta, that could have been a problem. So, again, a testament to the defense. But like you said, they're going to have to be cleaner, and if I was on that coaching staff, I wouldn't be opposed to having Cameron Granville and DeMarco Boyd, who are more change of pace backs, just kind of open it up and set a tone for them in this game before focusing them more on defense.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. It's 7:30 Friday at Mesquite Memorial Stadium, the renovated Mesquite Memorial Stadium. I'm looking forward to checking out the new digs,
the new elevator.
Yeah, the new elevator. Ooh. Yeah. That wasn't fun. Those years climbing up the stairs and getting up there. It was a nice facility before. 20,000 capacity. It's a great venue, but I'm excited to see all the renovations and just to see how much better it is now. On to Class 3A. We've got 2 teams left in 3A, and we'll start with 3A Division 1. We've got Mineola versus Brock. These two teams are undefeated, and for the last half of the season, they were ranked 1 and 2 in the state in the AP poll. Mineola, Brock, you're going to be covering this game. I'm sure you've done a lot of research on this one. What do you see as the biggest points and the biggest? What do you expect to see in this game Friday?
Yeah, it's a really straightforward game. You've got a Mineola offense that's very explosive with quarterback Jeremiah Crawford and Chance Perkins going up against what statistically at least is the very best defense they've seen. I mean, Brock allowed 7 points through its non-district schedule, 5 games. I mean,
Yikes.
That's incredible. And it's pretty much been like that. I think that the worst total they've given up is 19 points. Now, I don't think that Mineola will be held to 19 points. They'll probably smash that average, but that's what happens in the state semifinals, especially when you've got 2 twin tackles in Austin Anderson and Riley Anderson that are going to A&M. I think that they match up well against Brock, but I mean it's going to come down to execution and not fumbling the football. And it probably won't come as easy as it has in past games for Crawford and Perkins. They're going to have to make sure they're taking care of the ball and just keep charging forward against Brock.
Brock reminds me a little bit of Mineola last year, in the sense that I believe this is just the second year that Brock has had varsity football.
Mm-hmm.
And, without having a whole lot of success, here they are in the state semifinals with no real pedigree. Mineola did the same thing last year, kind of came out of nowhere to get all the way to the state championship game without any past success to kind of draw from. So this reminds me of Brock reminds me of last year's Mineola team, and it's going to be interesting. I think Mineola's the favorite. I mean, they've been ranked number 1 for most of the season. They have most of their players back, especially on the offensive side of the ball from a season ago. And Jeremiah Crawford and Chance Perkins combined for over 500 rushing yards last week against Sunnyvale. Right. I mean, that's to get that kind of production that late in the playoffs. That's something else.
Yeah, no kidding. And really good defensive effort against Sunnyvale too. I mean, that was a team that could throw all over them, and that defense shut them down for a half. And I mean, that allowed Mineola to go up 24-7 at halftime. So if you give Mineola opportunities, it's going to get ugly.
7:30 Friday from Grand Prairie. Is the Warrior Gopher Bowl or is the Gopher Warrior Bowl?
Gopher Warrior Bowl. They go alphabetical order on it, even though I think the Warriors are the older program, right?
Well, I mean, you would think that the Gophers, Grand Prairie High School,
right? Okay, yeah,
would be older. Okay, yeah, but either way, it's going to be in Grand Prairie. 7:30 Friday. Yeah,
it's a nice facility.
All right, on to 3A Division II. Defending state champion Wascom matches up with Idalou just outside of Lubbock. This game is going to be 7:30 Friday in Mineral Wells. What about Wascom?
Well, I mean, what can you say about Wascom that hasn't been said already? I mean, here they are making their 3rd consecutive state semifinals appearance. They're the defending state champions this time, and they're running up against a very one-dimensional offense.
Yeah, you showed me their numbers. Those are pretty unbelievable.
Yeah, Wascom fans just need to be aware of Brant Schilling and Brant Schilling and Brant Schilling. I mean, the guy has 2,943 rushing yards and really, I think, only has 266 carries, somewhere in that ballpark. And they played one less game than Wascom. So, at the same time, they've only attempted 32 passes all season, so they're not trying to hide the running game. And it's really going to I think this game's really going to come down to Wascom's defense, a unit that has more than 260 tackles for loss. I mean, you're not going to be able to stop Schilling. You're just not. No one has, and no one will. But if you can set them up behind the sticks a few times with a few tackles for loss, I think that you're in good position to win the game on the defensive side. And then offensively, you've got your own explosive set of players, headlined by Chan Amy.
Yeah, you had a very interesting story up on ETSN.fm today about Wascom and kind of the origin of what they are now, how it got started and what Whitney Keeling has done with that program. Talk a little bit about how Wascom has gotten to this point and what's been the key to their, as you put it, staying power.
Yeah, this wasn't, a great program when Keeling got. I mean, if you've only been following Texas high school football for a few years, you probably think that Wascom's one of the best in the state, which they are now. But when he got there in the winter of 2010, after the 2010 season, that program had gone 4-36 and really didn't have a culture of anything. So he dealt with the varsity players he had, but he also, with his coaching staff, emphasized the younger players, the 8th and 7th graders. And the 8th grade class, I mean, they graduated last year, and they spearheaded the run to the first 2 state semifinals games. And then this year, a team that wasn't probably projected to come this far, even though I think that everyone felt all right about them winning their district in this area, really has stepped up offensively. I mean, you've got some really good players behind Chan Amy, a well-rounded offense. I mean, it's more well-rounded in terms of passing than it was last season. And then, once again, defense is a nightmare for any playoff team that they're going to run into.
Yeah, just an incredible job done by Whitney Keeling at Wascom. I remember, I guess it was the 2012 season, the year right before their first trip to the semifinals in 2013, had to forfeit 7 wins because of an eligible player. So in the record books, it went down, I believe, as an 0-10 season. And I remember talking to Whitney Keeling about that, and he, didn't make excuses. He said it was his fault, and it's a shame that it happened that way, because I think Wascom was in line for its first playoff appearance in 20 years, and it happened. I think the second to last week of the regular season, when all that went down, when they had to forfeit those games, which took them out of playoff contention. And then the very next year, they go to the semifinals. They end up losing to the eventual state champion Refugio team, but then the next year, they win the state championship. And here they are, 1 win away from a return trip to the state title game. So just an incredible job done by Whitney Keeling and those players over at Wascom. And hopefully we get to see them. We get to see them next week, and maybe finish off back-to-back state championships. That would be a fantastic story. Before we put a bow on this show, I want to address the Longview situation. Some of you may be aware that there's been a petition floating around Longview, them wanting to oust John King as head coach, which I think is completely ridiculous. You've seen the overwhelming support that he's gotten from his players there. It's just ridiculous. I mean, they come so close against a very good Lake Ridge team last week. They had a chance to send the game into overtime, and they had their chances to win the game, and they stood toe to toe with a very good Mansfield Lake Ridge team, a Lake Ridge team that I think can win the whole thing. And the next day, you hear about petitions floating around wanting him removed as the head coach, and I think that's just ridiculous.
Right, the guy that took you to 2 state championships, in the past couple of years. He's very good. They're usually the best team in East Texas, and they're always competitive in the playoffs.
11 district championships in 12 years. I mean, I think he's only lost like 3 or 4 district games in the time that he's been there. They've made deep playoff runs. Have they gone as far as a lot of Longview fans would like? No, but I mean, they've been consistently the best program in East Texas, or one of the best programs anyway, since he's been in charge. And I think it would be a huge mistake to let a guy like that go, because you mentioned the players love him. They've had his back on Twitter. You've seen all the support he's gotten. It reminds me a little bit of the LSU situation, with Les Miles. That would have been a mistake, I think, to let him go, and I think the same thing with John King. So hopefully common sense prevails, and we see John King again next year on the sidelines at Longview. I think we will. Tremendous season for Longview. I covered that game Saturday night at AT&T Stadium in Arlington. It was a fantastic game, probably the best game I've seen this year, one of the best games I've ever covered. It was a great atmosphere, and best of luck to Longview in the offseason. I know they got some kids that are trying to get some college scholarships. They don't have anybody on that roster currently with an FBS offer. Who knows, that could change in the coming months. We've got a little while until National Signing Day, so we'll see how that all plays out. Now on to our offensive and defensive players of the week from last week. We mentioned him at the top, and it was a clean sweep of Carthage players. Our offensive player of the week is quarterback Jared Blissett. In the win over Silsbee, 23 of 35, 435 passing yards, which surpassed his own school record, which he set in the season opener. 6 touchdown passes, that tied a school record, and Carthage is moving on to the semifinals. Congratulations, Jared Blissett. And on the defensive side of the ball, It's the closer for Carthage on defense, defensive end Jared McClin.
No kidding. I mean, Jared had two fumble recoveries in the fourth quarter of the game and 10 tackles plus a sack. Carthage really dictated that game, and then toward the end, Silsby scored a touchdown to make it a one-possession game, and then Carthage messed up on the kickoff return. So suddenly Silsby's got a chance to tie it or take the lead with a 2-point conversion, and at the 15-yard line, fumbles. McClin's on it, returns it 75 yards, sets up a touchdown, and seals the deal with the Ravadney Hardy run. So.
Yeah, he did the same thing the week before against Navasota. He intercepted Shelton Epler, who I think had only had one interception all season long. They kind of stopped Navasota's rally in the fourth quarter when Carthage had a 2-score lead. So Jared McClin has really been the difference late in games for Carthage, especially the last 2 weeks. So congratulations to our offensive and defensive players of the week, both from Carthage, Jared Blissett and Jared McClin. Well, that's going to do it for this week's show. If you have any questions, comments, or complaints, you can hit us up on Twitter at Clint Buckley or at Mike_ETSN. Once again, good luck to Carthage, Gilmer, Mineola, and Wascom. Hopefully, we'll be busy preparing for 4 state championship games this time next week. Until then, have a great weekend, and we will talk to you all next time.